What is up, everyone? How's it going? So we have a 30-inch Turfmaster made by Toro, and right next to it is a 30-inch Exmark ECS 180 CKA 3000. That's a mouthful, but I want to go over the differences, and if you are looking for a full-size mower, 30 inches of course, which ones would I recommend? So let's go ahead, let's get a tally started. What do you say? First things first is the engine. They are both powered by the exact same FJ180V Kawasaki. So that one, kind of a wash. There are small differences. This little throttle bracket, very similar in shape, but with the exception of tiny little differences, everything is the same. So that one is a wash. Let's give 0 points. The next one's going to be the deck. So the deck is where the differences really start to appear. If you notice, the adjustment on here isn't present on both sides. You have to adjust one side and the other. Now, that can be a benefit and a hindrance, so I'm not going to really count that as a point, but what I can say is the adjustment for the Toro is significantly easier than the Exmark. Exmark, you have to do individual wheels, you have to pull, and it's just a giant pain. So usually when you set the height for one of these, you leave it. The rear is exactly the same thing. Right there. And on the other one, same thing. So that one, not really that big of an issue. So no worries on that one. I know this one doesn't have a bag, but the bag is exactly the same, just with a different branding on it. So in my opinion, the Toro gets 1 point. So right now we're 1-0. Now, continuing on with the deck. The deck is a little bit different on the Toro. As you see, there's a little ripple on there. Not so much on the Exmark. Now, I will say, this deck, I don't know exactly the thickness of it, but it is thinner. It's not as high of a quality of deck. And there's small differences here and there. This is obviously pressed metal. This is pretty thin. If you look on the other side of the Toro, or excuse me, the Exmark, it's a big, kind of seems like it's a weld or some type of rib ridge on it. There we go. So the deck itself is a lot heavier on the other one, on the Exmark. So I think we now have 1 and 1. So 1 for each. Now, the wheels really get me. This machine, according to the owner, was purchased last year. He is a professional, so he does use it often. But as you can tell, it is starting to show wear. Now, that machine was purchased a few years ago, and to my knowledge, has never had any type of replacements done. And they look very good. So far, we have another point for the Exmark. The wheels are very good quality. The blades are exactly the same, more or less. I'm not going to be too concerned over that one. There is one obvious difference. You see this bar? That is supposed to be some type of protection. You know, just these get shoved in trailers, there's shovels, there's other machines, and all kinds of stuff just happens to them. But if you look at it, this is pretty flimsy metal. It's, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch thick? No, not even that. I'm not really good on gauges. However, on the Exmark, we have a thick bar. That bar is pretty sturdy. I've taken that off many of times. It's there to stay. In addition, you see these little supports on the side as well. Those are lacking on the Toro, except we do have this instead. Now, that is a solid piece of 1/4-inch steel. This is a thin wall tubing, and while I'm sure it's probably adequate, it's definitely not as heavy duty. So, I think we now have a third point for the Exmark. Maintenance. Maintenance for the engine is exactly the same because they are exactly the same. Maintenance for the belts, exactly the same because they are exactly the same as each other's. So maintenance is going to be almost exactly the same. However, the thing that really gets it are the maintenance labor costs. This machine is a lot easier to work on the Toro. For instance, you remember that hindrance I was talking about earlier about the thin wall tubing? That thin wall tubing is not in the blocking the carburetor. So if you were to remove the carburetor, this would be a lot easier. On the other machine, you have to take off a lot of junk just to get the carburetor off. So your hourly rate is going to be higher, or hourly requirement is going to be higher on the other machine. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive just in labor. So that one is going to be towards the Toro. Toro is going to be cheaper for maintenance wise and parts being exactly the same, but your bill at the end is going to be a little bit lower. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. So, longevity. I haven't seen a whole lot of these Toros. However, I do see a whole lot of these Exmarks. They are built tough. They're bulletproof. I've seen them abused and they still keep going. They're easy to work on, more or less. I mean, they're all basically the same. But I can't really say too much about this one because it is relatively new. Now, Toro and Exmark are basically the same. I mean, look at it. It's like exactly the same design, more or less. However, I do feel, just because of the thinness of the deck, the lower quality parts for the support on the sides, and just general feel, I want to say, Toro's not going to last as long. The engine's going to stay the same. If you maintenance them, they're going to, like I said, they'll be exactly the same. However, I just don't see that with the Toro. So I think the next point definitely has to go towards the Exmark. Price. Well, that's an interesting one. I called my local shop just to make sure I got this right. But when I was there, when I would call them, I noticed that they had a sale on these. It was $15.99. So the other one, however, I asked if they had that, and they do. Well, currently they'd have to wait for it to come in, but whatever. It was roughly $24.99. So there is a few $100 difference. But there was a sale that they were going over, and the person on the phone didn't know exactly how much it was. He suspected it was roughly $2,099 or $2,100. So there still is a couple $100 difference. So in that case, I would say we probably have a point for the Toro. So right now, what is that, 5-3? I did a little more research. The deck online says it's 18 gauge steel. The deck on the Exmark didn't 100% say, but I didn't spend too much time looking at it. Just from what I can feel, however, it's probably either very close to 18, or I would say it's actually a little thicker. It's probably closer to like 16. So there's that. So I'm going to say, based on my experience, if you want a bulletproof machine that's going to cost you a little bit more and potentially a little bit more in maintenance, but it's going to last a lot longer, in my opinion, the Exmark is way to go. There are certain items that will not wear out as fast, like I said, the wheels, but at the same time, how often do you really have to buy them? You know, the cost benefit of it's going to be a little different. Also saying that, this is not a bad machine. It's really not. If this is well taken care of, they can easily last the same amount of time as long as you take care of them. So it really comes down to a point of what are you going to be doing with it? How are you going to take care of it? Because if you're going to take care of it, my idea is going to be the Toro. If you're a professional or you hire guys who do not have that same mentality of taking care of the machines, then that one is going to be a little bit of a better solution for you, just because it's going to be able to take a little bit more of a beating than the Toro. If it were me, I was doing the work and the maintenance on it, I personally get the Toro. If it were me and I was not doing any maintenance and I was not doing the work on it and I hired someone, I'd get the X Mark. So take that as you will. As a homeowner, if I wanted a larger mower, didn't want a rider, I'd probably take the Toro just because it's going to cost me less. I'm a homeowner, I don't use it every single day. So there's that. Something to think about, but hopefully this has helped you out. I want it to be a little bit of a benefit or help if you're kind of on the fence between the Toro and the X Mark, because they are very, very similar. They're basically the same, but there are all those tiny little differences. I didn't go over them all. The handles are different. In fact, I'm not going to go over just because it's a different type of system. That's really up to you, what you prefer. So they're both adequate. Like I said, if you are not going to be using this every single day for hours on end, this one's going to be more than adequate. The other one's going to be a little bit more adequate in that scenario, but if you did take care of it, this one would work just fine. That's what this is used already, and still in excellent shape, minus the wheels. So, having said that, if you're on the fence which one you need to buy, hopefully this helped you out. If you have any questions on it and you need some help, feel free to message me below. I try to respond to all my comments if I can. But I'm going to go ahead and leave you at that. Follow me on Instagram at smallengine101. If you like what you see, keep watching. Definitely consider subscribing. And leave a comment and a thumbs up if it did help you out. That helps me out a lot. If you need personalized help, feel free to go ahead and join. I do offer memberships, and as a perk. I'll go ahead and leave you at that. Have a good night. See you later.